I wanted to ask Pat, how does someone like Van Jones get his job inside the administration, coming from the Apollo Alliance of Soros-funded organizations, with all of his other baggage as well, of being a communist and being very open about his views? Doesn't this go in the face of what the Alinsky model of keeping it under wraps?
Well, they did keep it up. Well, first of all, for those of you who happen to see that day with Glenn Beck, when I was sitting with him, when he denounced this, and I think the expression is, someone told me, my daughter told me, my face, I just went, what? And I looked at him and I said, it just came out because I said, how did he ever get a security clearance? Because in 1977, I was an advisor to President Carter. I wasn't in the White House, had a White House pass. I had to go through a full field FBI check to get a White House pass. You're not allowed to get near the president with that kind of background. And the answer came, and Glenn looked up, Beck looks up into his researcher, his chief researcher, Joe Carey, and said, they suspended it, right? And Joe said, oh yeah, they suspended FBI background checks on people in the White House. That's how they got that done. That was on purpose. The point is, but they did hide him. He was the green czar. He was, oh, he is going to help us. This is a guy who was promoting police killers in Oakland, right? But understand where he comes from. The Tides Foundation, that whole operation out of San Francisco, in which Soros is a huge funder, and it goes right to Acorn, all these connections. When David talks about people with an agenda, and I will agree with him, they are. And there are some people with a very crazy sense of the world and a very radical agenda. They also have this huge amount of money from a lot of dumb people who think if we only tell them what to do, we can make America and the world better. The problem with Barack Obama, and I figured it out, my single biggest problem, is I realized, and it hit me about Berlin, when he couldn't find the time. He can go get a Nobel Peace Prize that even he admits he doesn't deserve, but he couldn't find the time to go to celebrate the fall of communism and the success of 40 years of American sacrifice and patience on the line. Because he is the first person to sit in the White House who is not an American exceptionalist. He doesn't believe that America is a special place. He believes we should be part of the world. And that all fits into a whole philosophy. But the answer for Van Jones is there are many of them. They've got people in here you can't believe. Well, you do. You watch those, you see Beck, see other people. But you know what? That they're all hidden out there. Well, this is the green movement. The environmental movement basically is a place I keep running into people who apparently, when things fell apart before, they've all become environmentalists. And what they do is they go, tell our children we will do this, we must save the planet. And I happen to be in favor of saving the planet. I happen to actually think there may be something wrong with the climate. I don't think Al Gore knows what it is, but I do think there might be. But I'm willing to have a real debate about it. These people are using this as an argument to make sure that it's like the head of the regulatory stuff, Cass Sunstein, his nudging philosophy. We'll just nudge you people along, kind of nudge them. We'll take their light bulbs away and we'll do this and we'll do that, and sooner or later. And it's also part of the philosophy of the fellow who said, what's his name, in your Czar book, Scott, the one that has said, what we have to do is we have to get rid of, this idea of growth is terrible. We have to deindustrialize. The whole idea of the environmental movement isn't to clean up the environment or do what we need to do or to get jobs. It is to basically deconstruct capitalism.
Exactly.
John Holdren, the science
John Holdren, they are to deconstruct capitalism. They are against I happen to believe in two things. I'm with Fred Harris, the one who said this. I happen to believe this country needs a good dose of what it believes in. Real democracy and real free enterprise. That is not crony capitalism or the Potomkin village democracy that we have now, the pretending that we have elected officials who respond to the people. This is the division going on in the country.
That's exactly right. I wrote an article for National Review 10 or 15 years ago called From Red to Green. It is it is a communist movement, the radicals in it. Because what it is if you're going to save the planet, you're going to give the government, it justifies giving the government as much power as it needs to save the planet, which is obviously infinite. Van Jones became he was a communist, an avowed communist, and then he became an Alinskyite, and then he became adopted by the Center for American Progress, Podesta. He was a fellow there, which is the center, that is the Democratic Party.
That is the nerve center.
The nerve center of the Democratic Party. That Van Jones was their protege. And the idea of having the green jobs post given to somebody like this is that the Apollo Alliance, which is Soros, is designing all the green jobs. What is this? This is a patronage system for communists. That the head of the New York State Apollo Alliance, who when Van Jones was in, would be orchestrating all the jobs in New York State and drew up the plans for it, is Jeff Jones. No relation to Van Jones, but very closely related to Billy Ayers and Bernardine Dohrn. I interviewed him. He was one of the leaders of the weather terrorist underground. When you look at these programs, there was SDS had a little newsletter called New Left Notes. And in one of the articles in that newsletter, somebody had written, "The issue is never the issue. The issue is always the revolution. It's all instrumental. What is green? The whole green program is to give jobs to SEIU activists and ACORN activists. Right. The health care plan is to get control of your lives and to fund ACORN and these organizations which will sign up the 47 million. The stimulus package is not about creating jobs. It's about employing. It's a patronage system for their people. The entire focus is on power and instrumentalities of power.
And understand the exercise of power at the end of the day. When you mentioned the comment about Andy Stern, the person you people really ought to meet, the two most important people in this whole movement, are George Soros and Andy Stern. Andy Stern is head of the SEIU, the biggest union now in the country. And it's all public employees and whatever. And he said, in that same interview, he said, workers of the world unite. He said, we believe in the power of persuasion, and if that doesn't work, we believe in the persuasion of power. Now, if you don't know what that phrase means and how they're using this, then you don't understand exactly how dangerous all of this really is. Because those guys are thugs. The SEIU, I'll tell you this. First of all, I don't understand. I mean, I happen to be a great believer in industrial unions. I don't quite understand public employee unions. I don't understand what they're doing. I mean, who are they protecting us from? The taxpayers? The people? I mean, what is the oppressor here? You know? And there is going to be a revolt over this. You see, what the pressure is coming in the country and the possibility here is very great. Next year, California is already learning, and the rest of the country is going to learn. When I was a kid, if you went into government for one reason. You went in because you wanted job security, and you traded off income and wealth for the security of a job. Today, the average federal worker, and the states are exactly the same. The federal, they make on the average, it's I think it's $120-some thousand in salary and benefits, or $140,000. The person paying the bill is averaging in benefits and salary less than $60,000. Now, there is going to be a problem when the country decides, and these people mean, this is what David's saying, these jobs, all this has to be funded by taxpayers. They have to have this operation, and therefore it's funded. But let me just dissent from David just a little bit. There are people who are dedicated leftists, as he said. There are also what I would call, what Lenin used to refer to, as a lot of useful idiots in this, who are being manipulated, who think they're doing good. And they're naive, but they are putting the money up, they're putting the manpower up, and they're being led in this. But this is a whole different country than the one that's sitting there waiting to be remobilized, which I hope is something we'll get to in this conversation.
Let me throw out one more question to David and Pat, and then we'll take your questions. Throughout the vast network of Soros organizations, there are some buzzwords that you hear throughout: healing, transformation or transformational, and social justice. What do those mean? Because they clearly don't mean the same thing to them as they do to us.
Social justice is the present code for communism. That's what it is. There is an inherent conflict between liberty and equality that anybody who's read Hayek or Ayn Rand or understands the system we live under is. People are not equal. I mean, that's, you know, after you're 5 years old, you should realize that. People on the left never do. In order to make people equal, you've got to take away the freedom of others, because you're going to have to stick your hands in their pockets and equalize things. And what Pat said about the power of persuasion or the persuasion of power, the titles of Isaac Deutscher's books on Trotsky. One is The Prophet Armed and the Prophet Unarmed, and the epigraph is from Machiavelli, that all unarmed prophets fail. And now for the good news.
Let's do some good news here.
Yeah. For 20 years, and I'll probably say this at other times during this weekend, but for 20 years, as somebody who came out of the radical movement and understands exactly who these people are, and let's remember, Walter Annenberg left $900 million to the communist left. Every Annenberg school is a left-wing school. Billy Ayers got $50 million in Annenberg funds. Billy Ayers, who hates this country, who hates everything that it was founded on, and he's a brain-dead communist, but he's a very successful one. He got $50 million from Annenberg. Conservatives have been asleep, and that's because conservatives are creators, and what they think about is not getting into conflicts and not building things. This is a war, and for 20 years I've been totally frustrated explaining this to people. How many people remember Cardinal Mindszenty? Cardinal Mindszenty was the cardinal in Hungary who, when the communists took over, instead of fleeing the country, holed up in the American embassy as a symbol of the resistance. So there is a Cardinal Mindszenty Foundation in the state of Missouri, which I was invited to speak at. And I was introduced. So, you know, if you're going to have a right-wing foundation, as it's so-called here, although to me the right wing is the liberal center of the country. And they introduced me. This is David Horowitz, a former peace activist and civil rights worker. Now that's where conservatives have been, but totally referring to these people as liberals. They're bigots. They are intolerant. They're totalitarians. There's one TV channel has a couple of critics of the Obama administration. They want to suppress it. This is who you're dealing with. Don't call them liberals. So anyway, I've been very frustrated over the years, of course, except in this audience, it's supported what we do.
Can I?
Let me just get to the good news, and then
Then I'll do the good news.
So I see what's happening now with the advent of Barack Obama and a lot of conservatives voted for Barack Obama. All the communists in the country thought that he was the Messiah. What were these conservatives? What did they know that all the leftists didn't know? Obviously, they didn't. I call this the Great Awakening. To me, for the first, Glenn Beck, for example. I put up, and I will say this again, but I put up in when did I put up? In 2005. I was carrying around in my head all these years. I know who these people are, and I see them all over the place, and I see the networks, and I see what their agendas are, and all the conservatives are calling them liberals and giving them the benefit of the doubt and not paying attention. So I finally figured out a way. I put up on the internet Discover the Networks, which is an encyclopedia of the left with all these connections. And I will tell you, there would never have been a Glenn Beck without Discover the Networks. And I know this because, I mean, I've talked to all his producers and researchers, and they're up there every day. But the fact that a media-savvy person, and Beck's been doing, for 20 years, should suddenly see the picture and have 3 million people who turn on that show, and he's not even in prime time. To me, this is the beginning. That these people, and this is where Pat is right about the craziness, what they are doing is politically stupid beyond belief. You don't come in America, which is a centrist country, where the founders devised a system which makes it very difficult to change things in a dramatic way, and try in the first months of office to transform the country, which is what they did. Within 2 months, they had totally unified the Republican base, but totally. And they did it through executive orders. Every issue, I mean, I don't remember all the issues. I don't care whether it's gay marriage or whatever it was. Barack Obama issues an order and solidifies the Republican base. Now they're in the process of turning the whole independent center Republican. They've driven a wedge through their old folks base, very important base for them, scared the bejesus out of everybody over the age of 65, and now they're doing it to women with this mammogram test. So there is a tsunami coming. If Republicans will just not form a circular firing squads and just get any leader who inspires confidence in the broad sectors of the American people, the Democratic Party is going to be a minority party in an extreme way very shortly.
Well, tomorrow we will talk more about the 2010 election, and boy, I will light that one up about what's coming. But let me just say this. Do not think these people are going to give up easily. Remember, let me just say something. Yeah, there'll be a minority. No, remember, first of all, let's understand, the opposition, there is no opposition in this country. The Republican Party is the most brain-dead group of people. If my party is corrupt, yours is brain-dead. And I will give you an example, just so you understand how stupid your people are. And I've done this for several years. The health care bill would have died in the Senate Finance Committee on a critical vote. That critical vote was Bill Nelson of Florida, this state, decided he wanted to undo Barack Obama and Rahm Emanuel's deal with the drug companies. The ones where the drug companies are now giving for the first time a majority of their money to Democratic candidates who put up $125 to $150 million of advertising for Obamacare. In return, they got Obama to back off allowing people to buy drugs overseas or the government to negotiate drug deals. Well, Bill Nelson gets up and says, this is ridiculous. They have to pay more. We're not going with this deal. There are 13 Democrats on the committee, 10 Republicans. He gets 9 other Democrats to go with him. He has 10. Chairman Baucus freaks. The White House freaks. Tom Carper, the Democrat from Delaware, goes along for good reason, and then another Democrat. There are 10 Republicans. At this moment, health care could be dead. All 10 Republicans vote to protect the drug companies. How stupid can you be? The same thing's going on in Wall Street reform. 71 cents out of every dollar coming out of Wall Street in these banks has been going to the Democratic Party in the last election cycle. And the Republicans give them unanimous support because they're upset instead of saying, oh, hey, you elected these people, they're yours. Live with what you get. And this is my thing about this. is there is not an effective opposition. You know, Democrats, we may be the highest priced call girls you've ever seen, and we will not kiss you in the morning. That's what they're telling these people. But you people, it's you go into a bathroom stall and say, for a good time, call the GOP. This is, if you think Republicans right now will win because they are a big red default button. But don't kid yourself. The country is not for what they're saying. This ACA political class and power in Washington that is against it, and you people have we have not done. And by the way, just so you know where I'm coming from, I was at Disney World the other day, yesterday, Wednesday, with my grandchildren, and I found the appropriate T-shirt so you can see where I'm coming from. And it says, as you can see, I'm grumpy because you're dopey. Okay? And the appropriateness is this. You people do not fight. I've never seen anything like it. You know, I made my I stand where I have always stood, I think, where I believe. I think I stand. Probably don't know what I'm doing, but that's where I've been. And I broke from this long ago. But you people, I'm with Ronald Reagan. Those of you who have the most to lose, well, he said, those who have the most to lose, why is those who have the most to lose will do the very least to keep it from happening? Well, all of these Democrats people, they put their money, they're doing everything. There's no case being made. The Republicans couldn't get themselves out of a wet paper bag. You have a lot of people take your money and do terrible things, but we do not get the message across. It's like David just said about health care. Right now, the mammogram thing, I could destroy the Democratic Party's support on this with women right now. If someone would simply point out, it reminds me of 1960 in Puerto Rico, when all the Catholic cardinals and bishops, I'm Catholic, told all the Puerto Rican voters they could not vote to re-elect Luis Menez Martin, the governor, and Kennedy said on Sunday morning before the 60 election, oh my God, if the country finds out, that Puerto Rico is American territory, we're done. And he was right. Fortunately, it were only 2 days. Right now, they have done the same thing on this mammogram thing. That's the proof of what we mean by death panels and when people use that phrase, or by rationing. And who did they do it to? They did it to their base. That's why it's so serious. But do you see anybody making this case? Here it is? No. This is the problem you people have to address, whether or not you're going to fight. The difference is my people will fight to the death, and they will do whatever is necessary. The question is, what are you going to do? Let me give you that. You don't support enough. You don't support people who will do things. Enough people don't support the activities of David. Scott's trying desperately to raise money to do the Soros thing, a brilliant idea on this. You know, Andrew Breitbart can't get any support for money, and we're going to give a reward tonight, the center is, to those 2 young kids. Meanwhile, Soros funds Media Matters to the tune of $7, $8, $10 million a year. What do? You don't fight. And I'll tell you, I'm from the other side of the fence here. When you people get serious and decide, and let me just ask you this one question. How many of you in here think that your children and grandchildren are going to have a better life than you had? How many will raise their hand and say that in this room? Will you understand what the issue now is? This is the country at stake, and you people are not doing enough. And that's all I have to say about it.
David, closing remarks?
No, it is the issue of the builders and the destroyers. I think that Democrats, they're born to politics. They love it. It's about power. Republicans are very reluctant politicians. They usually come in after they've done something in the private sector. They feel unclean when they get there, and they don't like the exercise of power, and they don't like conflict and combat. We have all these, the David Frum crew.
Those Republicans, you mean
Yeah,
those
no,
conservatives?
that's
David
the Gold
Frum,
Star.
David Brooks, those guys?
Yeah, it's you know.
The people on George Stephanopoulos, your folks?
They're the ones who are always screaming about Republicans behaving badly. And so, and I think it's the same. You know, I was going to say I should save this for when I talk a little bit about the center tonight or tomorrow night, whenever I do it. But again, we don't. There is no conservative George Soros. You know, conservatives, when they feel genuinely good, it's when they're giving money to hospitals and, you know, doing the Good Samaritan work. And they don't see politics as the Good Samaritan work. But I've never been able to find this quote, but Irving Kristol once wrote that conservatives that build buildings and universities, and they never realize that it's not the buildings, it's what goes on inside the buildings. And when the personnel change inside the buildings, all the good work they did in building those universities is gone. And the system will be gone, the system that does the charity. It's going to be government rationing. There isn't going to be private associations that do these remarkable things that people do in the private sector. So ugly as this battle is, it's a necessary one. It's just like war itself. You just have to think of it as a war. We are in a domestic war. And people don't like it when I say that. If you look at Front Page Magazine, it's news of the war at home and abroad. And people get very uncomfortable if you point out that there are people inside this country who are at war with it. Americans, born Americans, who are at war with us and are betraying us. So it's a very hard character change for conservatives. And as you know, my tagline is that I often think that I was sent as a former radical to teach conservatives bad manners. But really, that's what it is.
I'll say just one final thing, and then we'll get out of here. What David said about Republicans coming to office and then, you know, feeling uneasy about it, it's the same trying to push and fight for conservative ideals. We feel raising money for conservatives are naturally poor fundraisers because you feel kind of gross and dirty asking people for money to protect them from the government. But that's where we are in this war, and if we don't, you know, and this really isn't directed at you all because you're here, but we know a lot of people out there who aren't doing what they can to stop this. And President Reagan said it best when he said, "Those who have the most to lose have done the least to prevent its happening." Thanks. Good to be with you guys.